Evening, everybody. The subject of tonight's talk, B'ezrat Hashem, is Chanukah and the honeybee. What has Chanukah got to do with the honeybee, you may ask? I'm glad you're asking that question because that's what we're going to discuss. The world is a very round place. Most things in creation are round, or spherical. A chicken's egg, the human eye, the spawn of tadpoles, an oyster, a grain of sand, the stem of a flower, the suction pad of a squid, the ring of a tree trunk, the moon, the sun, the world itself. The predominant shape in nature is the circle or the sphere, more precisely. And there are very, very few squares in creation. I did a little bit of research of this before this year, and I could only come up with two. I'm sure maybe if you went into it more, you could find more, but the square or the cuboid shape is quite rare in nature. Two examples I managed to find was one is something which is called a cross C, and that's quite fascinating to see a picture of it actually. It's either called a cross sea or a squared sea or square waves. And it's a state of the sea where wind-generated ocean waves form non-parallel wave systems. Look like boxes on the surface of the earth. Have you seen this?
Yeah.
Okay, I've never seen it. So cross seas have a large amount of directional spreading, and they may occur when water waves from one weather system continue despite a shift in the wind. So this is sort of the two things battling against one another. A large amount, the waves, the direction of the current is going in one way, and the weather system, how do you say, the wind shifts its direction, and that causes these waves. These waves generated run at an angle to the old waves. The wind waves run at right angles. can run at a right angle. So that's a square shape. Another example of the square, or this case the cube, are something called iron pyrite crystals, which come almost totally close to being perfectly cubic. This is the picture I found of them. Very strange. But they're an anomaly. The shape, the square shape in creation, as we're saying, is very, very, very rare. Most of the natural world's built on endless permutations of the circle and the sphere. Why? Why is the circle seemingly the preferred, ideal, one might say, shape of creation? The Gemara in Yuma says that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought the world into existence, this is Yuma Nun Daled Amud Beis, he started off with a single point. A single point. An infinitesimal dot. And from there he drew forth the entire universe. And in point of fact, the name, one of the Hashem's names, is these Shad and then Dai. We say it's Shad Kai because it's one of Hashem's names and we don't want to pronounce it the way it's written. But that name breaks down is really an expression of Misha Omer La'olam Dai. He is the one who said to the world, die. Enough, sufficient, stop, die. Meaning that when Hashem created that point of infinitesimal point where non-existence or non-physical existence becomes physical existence, that point extruded, expanded and expanded and expanded, and theoretically would have gone on and on and on until Kadosh Baruch Hu Amar, die, enough. Ad kan, to hear and no more. If you take a point and you expand it in all directions, you get a circle. There's a famous Gemara that in Megillah, It's Megillah Yud Omid Beis, which says, Mokom Aaron Eino Minamida, the place of the Aaron, the Holy Ark, Eino Minamida, takes up no space. The place takes no space. So let's actually maybe discuss a little bit more this point of creation. Where is that point of creation? So Chazal teaches that original point where nothingness became somethingness is basically a little stone sitting on a small hillside, a couple of kilometers in this direction. And that's called the Even Shesiyah, the foundation stone. Shesiyah comes from the expression hushtat, to be founded. The foundation stone was the beginning of all creation, and from there the entire universe expanded. Now, that was the beginning of creation, and of course, that place has other significance. That's the place where Avram brought up Yitzhak Avinu as a korban, and that's the place where Yaakov Avinu had a dream of a ladder, mutzav arza v'rosha magia l'shamayim. Its feet, it was placed in the ground, and its head reached to the heavens. And of course, that's the place of the two Bati Mikdash, which Avonotenu Arabim we no longer have. And Bezrat Hashem, very soon, we'll have the third and permanent Beis HaMikdash. So that place is a place of tremendous significance. And if we just maybe delve a little bit into the idea of Yaakov Avinu saw that place as a ladder. Why a ladder? Because a ladder always connects. That place is essentially the connection of this world to the worlds above this world. The worlds above this world have no space or time. This is a world of space and therefore of time. Time-space is a continuum, an idea which is hinted at in the Maharal, and of course Einstein put it all together in a theorem, E equals mc squared. But that point of connection, the Gemara says that the Mokum Ha'aron, the place of the Aaron, occupies no space, which is strange if you think about it, because we know that the Aaron, the Torah itself, the Ark, the Torah tells us, has dimensions. It's 2.5 amos by 1.5 amos by 1.5 amos, 2.5 amos long, 1.5 amos wide, 1.5 amos deep. An amma is this. So we know how big the Aaron was. So how can we understand that the place of the Aaron took up no space? And the answer is, and if it's worth drawing it, but let me try and explain without drawing it. Or maybe I will draw it. Do you have anybody has a pen? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, give me a second here. Okay, here we go. My basic algebra. I don't know if you'll be able to see this. Okay, so let's say this is a plan of the Kodesh Kadoshim, the Holy of Holies, where the Aron HaKodesh rested. Okay, now, so that's it should be square, but it's not. But this is the Kodesh Kadoshim, and this should really be in the middle. And this is the Aaron, sitting there in the middle. Eina Aaron min Amida, that the Aaron took up no space, means as follows. If you would go into the base of the Kodesh Kadoshim, which of course you couldn't, but if you could, with the tape measure, and you measured this distance here, which we'll call x1, and meaning from the one wall to the one side of the Aaron, and then you measured from the other side of the Aaron to the other wall, which we'll call x2. And then you measured the entire width of the Kodesh Kadoshim, you would have the following equation. x1 plus x2 equals y. Meaning, the Aaron has dimension. 1.5, 1.5, 2.5. But it doesn't occupy any space. Why? Because the Aaron sits on a gateway. a gateway between two realities. On the one hand, it is of this world, but it sits at the gateway, at that point, which is the connection between this world and the next world. And of course, all the worlds above this world have no space and have no time. And therefore, even though the Aron has dimension, but it takes up no space. It's a perfect combination of those two aspects, of the physical and that which is above the physical. That is, we're talking about the way the world was formed, a dot which becomes a circle and gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So in a sense, one could understand that the essential shape in creation is therefore the circle, because the circle, all creations, certainly all creations, but most creations reflect their source. And because the source was a dot, the most prevalent shape is the circle, the sphere. The square, the rectangle, and other rectilinear shapes are the hallmarks of man. Why? Because quite simply, it's much easier to build with straight lines than with curved lines. I mean, even though you see modern architects, people like Frank Gehry, and they have this building in London called the Gherkin, and nowadays architects seem to be much more comfortable with non-linear shapes. But for sure, the easiest way to build anything is in straight lines. You want to build a box, 4 pieces of wood or 6 pieces of wood, whatever it is, it's going to be much easier than trying to make curved shapes. Man finds the straight and narrow, so to speak, much easier. It's much less demanding technically, and it's much less expensive. If you think about it, why is it more difficult for man to build a circular object than a square one? If the natural world is patterned on the circle, surely the circle should be the natural shape of man's works as well. Of course, it's so self-evident to us that the straight line, the rectilinear, is more convenient for us. But if you think about it, why is that? What does that mean? The circle should be the paradigm and not the square. The Gemara in Menachos stuff, Chaf Tes Amud Beis, tells us that God created this world with the letter He. He. Now, the letter He, if you look at it, we've mentioned this before, is really a dalud with an upside down yud. We mentioned this last week. If you look at the letter look at He, you'll see it's really a combination of those two letters. Now, we spoke about last week the children's game of the dreidel. And for those of you who weren't here, we discovered tremendous depth in this seemingly anodyne children's game. It really is, it's loaded with meaning. First of all, the Bnei Yisoscha says that the 4 letters on the dreidel, Nes Gadol Hayasham, Nun Gimel Hey Shin, are really references to the 4 great world historical empires which will exile the Jewish people. And they are chronological: Babylon, Porus Umadai, Persia and Media, Greece and Rome. The 4 great empires. Babylon originally snatched the Malchus from Klal Yisrael, and then the Persians came along and wrested it from them, the Greeks from them, and the Romans from them, and eventually the Romans will give back the Malchus ben David, to Klal Yisrael with the coming of Mashiach, Tzidkenu b'meheri Yameinu. And the reason, one of the reasons that the semel, the sign of the Romans, is, the Romans are referred to as Esav. Edom is referred to as is compared to a dava acher. It's called in polite terms, literally another thing, meaning the pig. That is how Esav is referred to, because Esav sticks out his trotters, which are split, and says, "Look, I'm kosher." The greatest danger from our brother Esav, the Briskerov said that when the Torah refers to Esav as both as Esav and was it Achi, my brother. So Esav has 2 faces. He can be the face of the Nazi, or he can be the face of Achi. We're all friends, let's all assimilate. And of the 2 threats from Esav, the second one has proved to be more deadly. If we look at the assimilation statistics in America, it's quite frightening. So Esau is compared with the pig. But the word in Hebrew for pig is chazir. And on a deeper level, the reason why they're connected with the chazir is because they eventually are the nation which will be machzir. They will return the malchus to Klal Yisrael. So coded into their name is this idea that they are the ones eventually who will return the kingship, Malchus ben David, to Klal Yisrael with the coming of Mashiach, when everybody will realize who the Jewish people are and who we always were all the time. So those are the 4 exiles. And the Bnei Yissaschar says that the Nun, Shin, Gimel, Hein, Neis Gadol, HaYasham really refers to each of those 4 exiles. The Nun refers to Nefesh, which is Babylon. Babylon destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, which is a connection between us and the Kodesh Baruch Hu, which is encapsulated in the idea of Nefesh. Why? Because the Korbanos are on the level, of course we can't go into the whole thing now, of the Nefesh. As it says in the Pasuk, Nefesh ki secheta, a soul, a person, but it's referred to as a Nefesh, will sin, and will bring a heavy Korban LaShem. The Korbanot, of course the word Korban has to be understood. In English it's always mistranslated either sacrifice or offering. It's not a good translation. A sacrifice suggests I'm giving something up. An offering suggests that I'm bribing you. And of course, that's the non-Jewish idea of sacrifices was like that. I'm giving something up, and I'm offering to the sun god. It's a kickback. I'm buying you out. The idea of the korbanot in Jewish thought is that which brings kirva, karov, korban. They bring closeness to Hashem. So the Babylonians, by destroying the Beis HaMikdash, severed that connection, which is the level of Nefesh, and that's the Nun on the dreidel. And then the next exile is the exile of Paros Modai, which is Guf, Neis Gadol, Gimel, Guf. The Persians wanted to destroy the last Jewish child, right? This is the seed of Amalek. Adna v'ad Tov, it says in the Megillah, everybody, in one day, destroy them physically. The next exile was the exile of Greece, which is the exile of Seichel, of intellect, the sin on the dreidel. Because their attack was not on the goof, they were quite happy for us to carry on living. They just wanted to turn us into Greeks, basically. And they were very successful, because at that time, the majority of the Jews had gone over to being assimilated Hellenists. The last exile is the exile of Rome, and the Roman exile basically is a summation of all the other exiles. They destroyed the second Beis HaMikdash, that was the, so to speak, the Bechina, the aspect of Bavel, of Babylon. Just like Babylon destroyed the first Beis HaMikdash, Rome destroyed the second Beis HaMikdash. They slaughtered Jews. Jewish blood was used to fertilize the fields around Beitar for 7 years before they were brought to Jewish burial, Kever Yisrael. And the 4th bracha that we say in Birkas Hamazon as a result is to commemorate that nace, that their bodies did not decompose before they were actually brought to burial. So that's the nefesh, the guf, and then the sin, the seichel, is basically the attack, which is represented by the founder of Christianity and his followers, which is the seichel, and one might say also the attack of secularism and atheism in our age. So that's so-called the seichel attack. And Rome is referred to with the letter Hey, Neis Gadol Hayasham. The Hey, why Hey? Because the Hey stands for Hakol. Because they're a summation of all of those 3 exiles, plus the Maharal and the Yissaschar brings down that this idea that the total is greater than the sum of the parts. That by unifying these 3 attacks, Rome has this power which makes it more dangerous in a sense. It's like in the Medrash we've quoted, it's like the Tahom, Al Pnei Tahom. For so vavo, right at the beginning of the Torah it says, and the land was V'haretz so vavohu, v'choshech al Pnei Sahom. So stands for Babylon, brings a posuk. Vo, v'hevilu l'havias Hamon, it's talking about Persia Modai, to vavo. V'choshech, that's Greece. Al Pnei Sahom, on the face of the deep. The Tahom is referring to Rome. Why? Because just as the deep seems to be bottomless, the Marianas Trench, so similarly the exile of Rome seems to go on and on and on and on and on, which it has done. The first exile of Babylon was 70 years, the Paros Modai was 52 years, Greece was 180 years, and we're still nearly 2,000 years into this exile of Rome, and it's still going. Those are the 4 exiles. The Maharal explains that the number 4 always represents, and this is how we get back to the circle, diversion from a single point. When something leads that pure point of connection between heaven and earth, that one, so to speak, kiss, where heaven and earth kiss, which is that infinitesimal small point, the nature of things is to spread out in directions. North, south, east and west. Directionality, linearity, the straight line. Man left to himself, when he focuses on this world, exemplifies the Daled. If you look at the Daled is 2 lines, right? The Daled represents a world which perceives itself to be the be-all and the end-all, whereas the Kodesh Baruch Hu created this world with a He. The He is the Daled focused on the Yud. If you took that Yud there and you took a Daled, the Daled really are like 2 sectors of a circle. The Daled is supposed to focus on that Yud. The Yud is the smallest letter. Notionally, the Yud should take up no space at all. It's the smallest possible thing that can exist as a letter. It's the smallest letter. And even though we have to give it some kind of directionality because you wouldn't be able to see it otherwise, but conceptually, the Yud represents something which is beyond space and time, which is Olam Haba, the world to come. So, what is Olam Hazeh all about, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu created with the He, is a Dalet, all the directionality, the linearity on this world, which is supposed to be focused on that infinitesimal point, on Olam Haba, the world to come. Hashem, I didn't mention that, sorry. Hashem created Olam Haba with the Yud. Olam Haba is represented by the Yud, Olam Hazeh, this world is created by the Dalet. Sorry. It's created with the He, and the He, this world is supposed to be a Dalet focused on the Yud. I just mentioned it again very briefly. We also said that you see the Dalet is the semel, is the symbol of those enemies of Hashem in this world. If you remember, the first of those enemies was the Dor HaPalaga, the generation of the dispersal. The Torah says that they built an ear v'migdal to rebel against Hashem. They built a tower, an ear and a migdal. Ear is a directionality which spreads out this way, and migdal is something which goes up and down, a tower. Ear, town, city, and a migdal. And that, I heard from Ramosha Shapiro, said in the name of somebody from a previous door, he said that is their semel, that is their symbol for all time. Ear v'migdal. So that power in the world of the Daled, the cross, is that power which basically sets itself up as a society which is self-inclusive, which understands that we don't need anything else. That was the milchama that they had with Hashem. We don't need Hashem. We're okay. We have the technology. You're fine up there, Hashem. We want the world down here. We want to secede. That was the whole mindset of the Dor HaPalaga. And of course, it's that religion, we'll talk about this more later when we come to Asara B'Tevis. It's that religion who took God, so to speak, and made him into a man. The idea is we have everything we need in this world. Ir v'migdal. And the ultimate logical or illogical or horrendous conclusion to that extrapolation of the Dalet in all its ways, if you think about it, if you look at a swastika, it's 4 Daleds. All of this we discussed in more detail last week. The point I'm trying to get to is that the whole idea of Chanukah, the symbol of Chanukah, even though it's a children's game, is we take those 4, that 4-sided dreidel, and what do? We spin it. And by spinning it, we are mevatel, we nullify its directionality and we return it to the circle, to that little yud. We make the Dalet focus on the yud. We make the directionality, the linearity of Olam Zeh, and we focus it as it should be on that yud, and we make the he. The spinning of the Dalet produces the yud, which makes the he, which makes the ideal way that this world is supposed to be. What's this all got to do with a honeybee? Okay. Excuse me. Sorry. So even though we said that the preeminent shape of nature is the circle, there exists a natural phenomenon that seems to step out of the klal, out of the general rule here. And throughout recorded history, observers have marveled at the hexagonal pattern of the honeybee's elaborate storage system. You will see in a beehive. You will see in a honeycomb. More than 2,000 years ago, the Greek scholars commented on how bees apparently possess, quote unquote, a certain geometrical forethought in achieving just the right of enclosure to hold the honey efficiently. In the 19th century, Charles Darwin described the honeycomb as a masterpiece of engineering that is absolutely perfect in its economizing labor and wax. So, needless to say, from our point of view, the honeybee will not be receiving a Nobel Prize this year. Basically, what he was saying without realizing is it was a tribute to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how Hashem created a beast, an animal, so with such intuitive wisdom which was given to him to create this shape of the honeycomb. The honeycomb is a hexagon. If you will, a hexagon is a six-sided circle. It's a circle with six sides. Now, why does the honeycomb seem to depart from the natural roundness of creation and lean towards the linearity that we ascribe to man? Why is the honeycomb a synthesis of the circle and the square? The answer is that the hexagon represents an ideal synthesis of form and function. If the honeycomb was round, so think about it, you put all those round honeycombs together, there'd be a lot of wasted space between the cells. And also the whole structure would be much weaker because the point of contact between the separate cells would only be where the two circles kissed. Let's take it a little stage further. Why stop with six sides? Why not have eight sides? So if the honeycomb was octagonal, which would be, let's say, closer to the ideal circle of creation, then the modules wouldn't interlock. Try putting 8 side pieces together. They don't interlock. There'll be some space between each cell in the honeycomb. And thus, the hexagon is this perfect blend of the circle and the square, the ideal synthesis of function and form of this world and beyond. The world beyond is a world of form, of ideals. The world that should be, the Yud. This world is a world of function.
The Magen David, perhaps the brother was going to mention it, but inside of the Magen David there is an hexagon.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Inside the Magen David there's a hexagon, okay, needs to be thought about.
If the
yeah, no, I mean, I'm not denying that that's the truth. I'm saying the symbolism of that, the idea of that needs to be thought about. I mean, Bechlal, it's an interesting topic, which I always meant to go into, is the history of the Magen David, which is clearly a Jewish symbol, although it's not a symbol that we use so much nowadays anymore. It's not, okay, that's another, but thank you very much for that. I'd like to explore that. Okay, so the hexagon is the perfect blend, the perfect synthesis of the circle and the square, a perfect blend of form and function, a perfect synthesis of this world and the world beyond this world, of function and form. There's a Platonic concept that everything in this world has an ideal form in the world above. Why? So the next question is fine, very good, but why the honeybee? Why was the honeybee, of all creatures, chosen to express this synthesis of form and function, circular and linear? Form and function, circular and linear, this world and the world to come. Now the bee is a unique creature in halacha because itself is not a kosher creature, but its produce, honey, is. It's the only creature that I'm aware of that it itself is not kosher, but what it produces is. In other words, the honeybee represents the transformation, the synthesis, if you like, maybe transformation is better, of that which is osa, prohibited, to that which is muta, permitted. In fact, the word asur is better translated as bound. Matir asurim, we say it every morning, who unleashes the bound. The idea in the deeper sense of what is asur is it's axiomatic that nothing can exist unless it has a certain spark of kedusha, a certain kind of godliness to it. Even things which are tameh, which are asur, could not have any kind of existence unless there was, at some level, however distant, the Ratzon Hashem for that thing to exist. So when we talk about something which is asur, we talk about it being bound, which means whatever kedusha, whatever holy spark that it has to contain in order for the thing to exist at all, is inaccessible to us. It is asur. It's bound. We can't connect to it, and it only connects to itself. This lack of connection is, in essence, is the idea of tumah. Tumah comes from the root satum, which means sealed. Something which only connects to itself by definition is tameh. Things that, let me give you an example. Tumah always results from the failed potential of connection. Where connection was possible and it didn't materialize, this results in tumah. The word, as I said, tumah means satum, sealed. Have an idea maybe that we'll have to ask Rabbi Greenblatt, who's an expert on words. But I have a feeling that the word in English, tomb, is from the word satum, which means sealed, because a tomb is sealed. And interestingly enough, the greatest form of tumah in halacha is a dead body. Now, we're not talking about contagion, we're not talking about plague, we're not talking about disease. We're talking about spiritual tumah, impurity. Why is a dead body the greatest source of tumah that can exist? Because it is failed connection. The life is no longer connected. We don't see the life anymore. There's a pasuk in Devarim that says, Machatzti va'ani erpa. Kodesh Baruch Hu says, Machatzti, I have slaughtered, I've struck down, I've destroyed. Ve'ani erpa, and I will heal. You can darshan Machatzti, I have struck down, as Machitzati. My Mechitza, the Mechitza, this seemingly impenetrable barrier between life and death, eventually Hashem will heal that, so to speak. He will take away that seemingly impenetrable barrier. The reason why, the greatest tumah that can be, the Avi HaTumot, is contact with a dead body. Why? Because a dead body seems to say, that's it, this is the end. And that is the greatest disconnection that can be. We know intellectually, conceptually, the soul goes on. But what we see when we see a dead body, and that's a cadaver, that is the tumah, is the sense of that the connection has come to an end. That is why a dead body is the aviyatumas. Other kinds of tumors are, for example, lashon hara. That's inherently tameh. Because why? Lashon hara divides people. Lashon hara is an expression of the separation of where there was the potential for connection, it was destroyed. When a person spoke lashon hara in the times of the Bible, times of the Chumash, his speaking lashon hara would cause visible lesions on the skin, called saras, mistranslated as leprosy. the monthly cycle of the human reproductive capacity in a woman causes tumor. Why does a woman, when the lining of the womb breaks down, why does she become tameh? Because the lining of the womb represented the potential for connection, the potential for new life. And because that new life failed to materialize for whatever reason, so the destruction of that connection represented by the menstrual cycle of the evacuation of the womb, that is inherently tameh. Nothing to do with blood, nothing to do with anything physical. People get these things so wrong. It's the failed opportunity for new connection, new life. It's a failure to produce the future. It's the same idea, so to speak, as the dalad which doesn't connect to the yud. Something which stays trapped in this world. Something which fails to produce a future, fails to produce a connection, like a dead body, seems to be the lack of future. And it's interesting that when the person becomes tameh, where does he go? He goes to a mikveh. Mikveh is from the same root as tikva. Tikva means hope. Hope is all about the projection to the future. Hope is only in the future. Hope is the ultimate playing out, so to speak, of what the future should be. And therefore, when the present destroys the future, so to speak, or the present fails to produce the future, either through the monthly cycle or through Lashon Hara or through contact with the dead body, a person has to go to the mikveh, because the mikveh is tikveh. Tikveh represents the ability of the present to move into the future. The honeybee symbolizes the transforming of the potential into the actual. It itself is tameh, but what it's able to do, to produce, is something which is tahor. The honeybee is really the perfect example of how that which is, so to speak, locked in itself, tameh, satum, asur, bound up, connects to something which is tahor. Tahora. Tahor means pure, but tahora is also from the same expression as tzoharayim, afternoon. Why is it called? It's achrei tzoharayim is afternoon. Tzoharayim is the brightest time of the day. Noah put into the aron. Noah put into the ark a tzohar. This is a machlokes whether that means a jewel or a window. Anything which is transparent is the concept of tahara. It's not sealed, it's clear, you can see, there is hope, you can see to the future. The Gemara talks about the most open part of the Mizbeach as the Tahoro Shel HaMizbeach. So the honeybee, so to speak, is able to take which is bound, which is osa, which is dark, which is tameh, which is self-centered, and from its body create something which is going to be pure, which is tahor. And therefore, one might say that is why the honeybee was chosen, so to speak, to produce this perfect synthesis of the circle, which, so to speak, as we said, is emblematic of that single small point where Olam Haba becomes Olam Hazeh, the connection between the worlds, Yaakov's Sulam, and this world, which is the world of linearity. The hexagon, which is the world, so to speak, of the bee, that creature that transforms, it itself is tameh, but it's able to produce something which is tahor. That is why it's that animal, maybe one can say, that was given this job to create this shape, which is a perfect encapsulation of the synthesis of the circle and the square. And as, of course, as we said, this is how it plugs into Chanukah, because the four nations, which are the enemies, so to speak, of the Hashem Echad, the unity of Hashem, that children's game takes them, literally spins them, and creates reverses, that linearity, that directionality, to express that point, the still point in the turning center of the circle, which is Hashem Echad U'Shmo Echad. Okay.
Also, the nature of honey is that it's a product that lasts, like, understand forever. Like
Yeah.
it's
Doesn't expire.
It also has this.
Yeah, that's interesting too.
Yeah.
I'm sure one could develop this
Yeah.
further. Just as the beginning of an idea. I mean, it's
With a lot of that.
okay.
I mean,
Thank you. Pleasure.